Go.
Good morning. Another reading from your dear old dad to Sarah, Jesse, and Libby, and to whomever else wants to listen to the reading. This one's called A Cab Driver, and this is from the book Praise Works from Merlin Carruthers. This one's called A Cab Driver. Peter was angry, bitter, filled with resentment, and he had a good reason to be, from a human standpoint. He was in a prison that had a church member as its cornerstone. When Peter was 20 years old, his parents operated a small bakery in Brooklyn. They worked hard and by frugal living had to put 3 boys through high school. A friend in their church said, quote, "You should expand your bakery so you can hire someone to work for you and not have to work so hard yourselves." The idea sounded good to Peter and his brothers, so they encouraged their parents to expand the bakery. None of the sons worked in the business, and they wanted their parents to find a way to take it easier in their old age. Further talks with the man in the church revealed that he was willing to lend them the money. They borrowed from him and expanded the business. Everything looked beautiful. The sons rejoiced that their parents would soon be able to relax a little and hire someone to do the hard work. When Peter's parents made the first payment on the loan, they tried to figure out how long it would take to pay the loan off. They were confused when they discovered that after the first payment, the total amount owed was greater than the amount they had originally borrowed. How could this be? How could this possibly be, they asked the man who had loaned the money. "This is what you agreed to on the papers you signed," was his only answer. They kept making the payments, but the amount owed and the interest due continued to grow. Eventually, the burden became so heavy that they lost the entire business to their fellow church member. Peter lived with his parents and supported them by driving a taxi cab. His bitterness and anger grew year after year. He says, quote, "I lay awake at night thinking up things I could do to that church member who had robbed my parents. The only reason I didn't do anything to him was that I could never think of anything bad enough for what he had done to my parents." Whenever anyone got into Peter's cab and started any kind of conversation about religion, Peter would pull to the curb and say, if you want to get out, okay, but don't talk about religion in my cab." The parents grew in bitterness as they faced lifelong dependence upon their hardworking son. One day a man left a book on the seat of Peter's cab. He was gone before Peter realized the book had something to do with religion. "Prison," he read. Then he thought, that's where that church member would be if there was any justice in this world. Because he had nothing better to do, Peter glanced through the first page of Prison to Praise. The plot interested him, so he kept reading until another passenger got into the cab. Throughout the day he read whenever he was free. By late afternoon he had completed the book and God had reached his heart. Bitterness flowed out with his tears as he asked God to forgive him or to forgive his own failures. Quote, "God, for 10 years I have hated this man. I see now that you have used him to bring me to Christ. Please forgive him and me. Thank you for what he did." Peace so filled his mind, Peter's, that he yearned to share his new understanding with his mother and father. After dinner that evening, Peter was sitting in the living room with his father, silently praying for God to show him how to share his discovery with his parents. Just then, there was a knock on the door, and after his father went to answer it, there stood a man who had robbed them of the business. They hadn't seen him for 10 years. God has made me so miserable and guilty. This is the guy standing at the door, talking to Peter's dad. So this is the robber of the church that loaned Peter's dad the money. This is him speaking. God has made him so miserable and guilty that I have had to come and beg your forgiveness, he said. The son's heart leaped for joy. God had already answered Peter's praise, but the father was unmoved and silent. Quote, the robber says, your bakery has grown and prospered. It is worth several times what it was 10 years ago. God has told the man that robbed it, I must give it all back to you. Here are all your papers you need. The son could hardly believe his ears. How could God have moved so quickly? When he looked at his father, he knew that a greater miracle had happened. Tears of joy were running down his father's face. The bitterness was gone. Peter's family is now prosperous, but more importantly, they are a family filled with praise. Yes, the heart of a man is deceitful, but God is still able to melt the most stubborn and obstinate people, only if we trust him. And there's a Bible verse at the very end of this that is Romans 3:23 and 24. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God and are justified freely by his grace through Christ Jesus. I hope this touches most of you out there, to my three girls. So, at any case, always be thankful and not bitter at anyone, and forgive quickly and easily so that your life can be blessed in this kind of format, and you can leap for joy to see expressions on my face, to see that you all finally understand that holding on to bitterness is eating up inside of you and tearing you apart. Have a blessed day.